I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, Lauren Brown takes a deep dive into the stark realities of Alzheimer's disease in her wonderful book, Who Wasn't? The Gut-Wrenching Truth About Alzheimer's. Through poignant anecdotes and hard facts, the author paints a vivid picture of the struggles faced by those both diagnosed with the disease and their caregivers as well. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Prime 7 Media for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her important book. Lauren, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me, Logan.
This is an issue that so many people deal with today as we're living longer and longer and longer. The likelihood of developing Alzheimer's or dementia seems to increase, right?
It does. In fact, right now there's about 11 million Americans who struggle with that. 11 million caregivers are who's dealing with that. Right now there's about 6 million people with Alzheimer's and 11 million caring for them, usually unpaid. And so it is on a trajectory to increase to double by 2050 if they don't find a way to stop it. Right now, it's the only disease in the top 10 causes of death without a means of cure or prevention. There are 2 drugs that are out, but they are only if caught early, and symptoms can go undetected for 10 years. So it's important to be tested as well, because that's the only hope we have at the moment.
Now, I've heard a lot about plaque buildup in your brain, that kind of thing, amyloids. Is that at the heart of Alzheimer as far as we know right now?
So that's actually what Dr. Alzheimer's found, was the plaques and tangles. And basically it's a disconnect of the way the brain works. The example that I like to use with Alzheimer's, which is different than dementia. Dementia is the overarching umbrella. So it's like playing Pac-Man and taking the most recent memories, working your way to the end. So although people can remember when they were a child, they don't need to be treated like a child. They don't need to, hey, what's a cow saying? But they will remember those memories because they just dissolve.
Yeah. So their short-term memory seems to go first, and they seem to retain their long-term memory.
Correct.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your background and your interest in the disease.
I really only had a peripheral exposure with my father-in-law who had dementia. And at a wedding, I noticed how his daughter would treat him and how he would respond. So he didn't know who she was, but he had this really tense whatever. And I hadn't seen him, so I wasn't surprised that he had a reaction. But then he danced with his granddaughter, and proud as can be, biggest smile on his face. And he didn't remember her either, but he knew how she made him feel.
Right.
And so that's really started piquing my interest. Then I started working in a care facility as the chaplain. And so I got to see the caregivers as well as the residents. And I needed to pick a topic for my dissertation. And I chose to focus on what the caregivers go through because there's no research on it for Alzheimer's caregivers, very minimal, because it's a whole different animal than everyone else.
And it's really tough on caregivers because you're dealing with someone who is paranoid at times, agitated at times, doesn't recognize you, forgetful. I mean, I have family members who have Alzheimer's, and it's very, very difficult. I mean, for me, I've noticed paranoia as a manifestation of it. They feel people are taking things from them or stealing things from them, and they become combative because of that. It's really a heartbreaking disease. And the person who's catching the brunt of it is often the caregiver, whether that's a family member or a hired staff member, right?
Right. And the problem is what happened 5 minutes ago may not be the same thing that happens 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 weeks. So
Yeah.
it's constantly changing. So they never know what they're in for.
Mm.
Okay? And sometimes they remember the person, but as it continues to deteriorate, they have no idea who the person is.
Yeah.
So I spoke with one of our congressmen on a town hall meeting, and he said, I finally went and saw my grandfather, and my grandfather said, it's about time you got here. And I was so touched that he remembered, till
Mm.
Grandpa said, you're the best nurse in here. He
Yeah,
had no idea who he was.
I know. It's tough. It's tough because it's, for the people who are dealing with it, it's just, that's their mother, but their mother doesn't remember them. And their mother is the one who's screaming. And it's just torture. And so what's your best advice for people who are dealing with a parent or a loved one with Alzheimer's and getting the brunt of the negative emotions?
Don't go at it alone.
Mm.
So as I spoke with the 10 women and we started sharing what I could from the dissertation, they said, I had no idea other people dealt with this.
Yeah.
And so the problem is mental health stigma very much thrives. Then there's ageism. And so that's an issue for the people they're with, they're caring for. But then if they go out in public and that person misbehaves, now the caregiver is utterly embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
And often other people put their own 2 cents in.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've been working to do is to do Alzheimer's simulations to help people understand that empathy part. So for the caregivers, right, they can't go at it alone. Caregivers statistically have a higher cause of death than caring for such a stressful situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so you can't go at it alone, and you have to have support of those people who are going through it. So I've had people say, you know what, my dad died from cancer, my mother is dying from Alzheimer's. Dad always knew who I was.
Yeah.
And so connect with people with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's Association has lots of resources. There are so many agencies that do support groups. Go to every one of them. Okay, just go. Don't hide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because it's worse, and you need to talk to people.
Yeah. The Alzheimer's simulation is interesting. I was preparing for this interview today. I read some of your notes about it, and they were about goggles that are scratched and gardening gloves that are stiff and so forth. Tell us a little bit about what the simulation entails.
So we actually have 6, but the one that I'm hoping you'll do today with us is you write your alphabet. That's not very difficult.
Right.
Right. And so as we go through the different steps, it mimics the deterioration of Alzheimer's.
Mm.
And so my favorite story for that is had a young 20-ish year old girl was like, my father has Alzheimer's. Hey, why don't you do some simulations?
Yeah.
So by the time she got to her second one, she just cried.
Mm.
And she's like, I understand why he's so grouchy and why he's so frustrated.
Yeah.
And that, just to have that empathy portrayed to others. Okay. And so that's what the simulations do. Many people say, oh my gosh, do I have Alzheimer's? No, but I want you to feel like what it is to have it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
then you're more likely to understand and be patient.
Right.
I love doing with students, with kids, because they actually have more empathy than adults. Right. And so when they come like, hey, that's what grandma has, like, oh, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
And so we do all ages, and it's important that people understand it. It's not just forgetfulness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, trying to say your alphabet backwards would be absolutely impossible for me.
So you're very lucky. It's just forward. I can say it backwards.
Right. So you want me to say it forward now?
Are we going to do it now?
No, whatever you want to do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you have your paraphernalia in front of you?
I don't have any paraphernalia with me, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
But we can discuss how it is performed, though. So you have people do the alphabet.
So they write their alphabet with their dominant hand. And we talk about how much effort was that? Not at all. Right. Okay. And then we have them write with their non-dominant hand.
Right.
And that's when they're always, oh, I can't do that. How do I do this? What? And
Right.
that's when they panic. And we just say, don't worry, it gets worse.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And
So, and
then,
it, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was saying it is a progressive disease. So that kind of goes along with the progression of it getting worse and harder and more difficult and struggling. And so this, I think the simulations are great because they do give and create empathy for the person who's suffering with it. Um,
So there's two more stages in that simulation, though.
Go ahead.
So then we will take the gloves, and when we do them with Velcro, but we're going to
Mhm.
do them with tape. So we tape these fingers together at the knuckles of the
Mhm.
non-dominant hand, and they try to write their alphabet again.
Right,
So now not only are they thinking about what they're writing and how to write it, but now their body isn't working as well as they expect it to.
right.
Then we add goggles. And
Mm.
so you can do them scratched. We actually do them with paint. So
Mhm.
silver paint and glue and sponge paint it so you can see dots through it.
Yeah,
And so we've come to realize that that's why people don't pay their bills. They can't see it.
right.
Okay. And so when we've done that one, pay your bill, they're like, this paper is plain white. There's nothing on it. They take the goggles
Right,
off and go, it's a full bill.
right. Yeah. Yeah, the struggles are very real, very real. Does putting around notes, is that helpful to a person who has Alzheimer's?
It can be depending on the stage that they're in. So in early onset, they can do that. So you can't teach something new because they're
Mhm.
not going to remember it, but you can have that jog their memory. Okay,
Right,
but as it progresses, you have to know what that note says and what it means.
right.
Okay, so as it progresses, it doesn't help. We've started our business called Phone Home that we can walk people through, like say, hey, it's lunchtime. Let's go talk, let's go take your meds and we're going to chat and have a conversation so that seniors don't feel like they're being, treated like juveniles. So, hey, how's your day? How's this? How's your weather?
Mhm.
Okay. Hey, it's time that we're going to go take your meds. I'll do mine too. And
Yeah,
to try to come alongside them and help facilitate their independence while coaching them. So we're their life coach, their advocate. Our company can transcribe as well as record the conversations. And so by doing that, it gives that extra transparency
mhm.
for the seniors. We've just found out about a company that I forgot their name, I apologize, that give out transcribing telephones. It's part of a federal
Right.
grant.
I've seen that.
And so that's what we're starting to do to say, hey, here's yours, here's mine. Okay, so now we have the double transparency and the paranoia. Well, they said,
Hmm. Yeah.
um, I use that example because a long time ago, when I was a teenager, I had left my mother a message and she did not, she had mental health issues, not
Hmm.
Alzheimer's. Left her a message that said, "Oh my God, I'm going to be late. I'm going to back to whoever's house. We ate so much. I feel like I'm pregnant." All she heard was,
I'm pregnant.
"I'm pregnant." As a teenager, I got
Right.
blasted when all I did was eat a lot.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing.
So that transcription on both sides helps um, defer a bit the
Yeah.
paranoia. It's
That's what
still
my
there.
my wife's mother actually is battling dementia, and that's what she does with her when she communicates with her. She'll have the phone conversation, and then she'll take all the key points and text them to her.
Mhm.
So when the mother calls back in 5 minutes and said, "When are you coming?" She's like, "Mom, I just told you, take a look at the text message I just sent you."
Right.
And it kind of calms her down and brings her down. So it's basically what you're saying, reinforce with writing is often helpful, particularly when the
Right.
disease is not that bad.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so to be able to say, particularly people who work and when their person is staying at home, okay, you can go and look at that. And if you have questions, call me.
Mm,
But as it deteriorates, that's too much of a process too. But
absolutely.
early on, it's a coping strategy.
For people who have questions about someone in their life who's struggling with memory issues or dementia-like issues or Alzheimer's issues, how do you distinguish or differentiate between normal aging, Alzheimer's, and something else?
The easiest way is I would refer you to the Alzheimer's.org, the
Mhm.
Alzheimer's Association. And so they actually have a very clever ways that you can know. So I left the list, so I remembered.
Okay,
So
good.
for example, making a bad decision once in a while, or not making the right choice.
We all do
Um,
that. We're all
we
guilty as
all do
charged.
that,
Yeah.
right? But poor judgment and decision making overall
Hmm.
is going to be more of a symptom of Alzheimer's.
Hmm.
Okay, missing a monthly payment on your bill,
All
right?
guilty of that.
Right?
Right.
But the inability to manage a budget.
Right.
Okay, so not only that part about not seeing the bill, okay, but also how much money. I mean, just
Hmm.
balancing a checkbook is
Right.
crazy to do it when you have your faculties,
Right.
right? And certainly those struggling with Alzheimer's are not going to use the electronic banking to
Right.
confirm that. And so that's typically also going to be indicative they can't manage that budget when they had already been doing it.
Hmm.
So I know of people who dad always did the bills, dad dies, mom has to do it and can't manage. That's not the same thing
Hmm.
because they haven't done it before.
Right.
Um, so this is one of my favorites. So forgetting which day it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
My favorite.
Guilty, particularly like in the summer if you're on vacation or something
Right.
like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that is normal aging. Okay.
Hmm.
However, losing track of the date, more like the month or the
Hmm.
season.
Right.
Okay. So, for example, it's really cold inside when you have the air conditioning on. So, therefore, it's believed to be winter.
Right.
Okay. Or vice versa. It's hot in here, it
Right.
must be summer. And so that's more of a sign of Alzheimer's. Um, Sometimes forgetting which word to use, that tip of
Mhm.
the tongue phenomenon, is very common.
Right.
Okay. However, one of the big indicators is that it takes a long time for the person to have a conversation.
Mm.
Okay. You and I, it just flows.
Right. Right.
And my dad would say, you talk a dog off a meat wagon, right? Just flows. I just talk.
Yeah.
However, for a person with Alzheimer's, first they have to think about what they want to say, the
Mm.
words they need, and then the context. Okay, so we've been raised with grammatical context and we know the flow it needs to be, but that's a huge indicator.
Mm.
And then lastly, the one that people tend to almost minimize Alzheimer's when they say, "Oh, I've lost this again. I must have Alzheimer's," or I'm on the phone. Where's my phone? Okay.
We're all guilty of that also. I have 100 pairs of reading glasses around my house, so I can always find one.
I
So
understand. I
that's
have
why it is
multiple.
challenging because so much of this is normal behavior. But once it gets to the point where I guess it's pathological,
Right.
that's when you have an issue, right?
So when it interferes with activities of daily living, that's the ADLs that people
Right.
talk about. So one of the stories in the book was about how one of the caregivers had just had lunch with mom,
Mhm.
and mom calls when she gets home, except she called a little early and
Mhm.
said, "Hey, what's going on?" She said, "I have no idea where I am." Like,
Mm.
okay, it's a highway, it's very straightforward. And she had to talk her through to figure out where she was
Right.
and then to be able to go find her and escort her and all that. But that's one of the big things that happens is that, like, I have no sense of direction.
Right.
Okay. Massachusetts roads were cow
Oh
paths,
yeah.
so north, south,
Worse.
east, west at the same time. So
Yeah.
don't give me compass things. I don't get it. Okay. But you've traveled this straight road every time and you don't know where you are.
Right.
Okay. And
Exactly.
so that's going to be the biggest indicator as well.
Let's focus on your book for a little bit.
Okay.
Why did you decide to write it? Who is it addressed to, and how do you think it'll help them?
So I wrote it because I had written the dissertation and
Mhm.
142 pages of scientific stuff. I didn't want to read it, so nobody else does either. Um, but I thought the stories needed to be told
Hmm.
in part to honor those who care for these people, but in part because I think our healthcare system fails to recognize what is going on.
Mm.
Okay, that I have heard of healthcare staff that just remember, I just told you, no, no, you need to understand this. Or when the caregiver goes and says, hey, look it, I need this really ridiculous request. Because sometimes you just need that ridiculous request.
Yeah,
Okay, so if you have toddlers, right, sometimes, if you cut the sandwich the wrong way, it's life ending for them. Right?
exactly.
But that's similar. That's similar. Like, okay, I know that it's a sandwich and I just cut it in, diagonal, but today it had to be squares. Can I have another sandwich? Like, just do it because they don't even want to ask you that.
Right. Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
primary thing is for other people to understand how to handle the caregivers. I think
Mm.
we're doing a much better job understanding Alzheimer's people living with this, but their caregivers are a whole different breed.
Mm.
Most people, we had to put dad in a care facility, mom in a care facility, and those people will take care of them and you go visit.
Mm.
Okay. With Alzheimer's caregivers, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Okay. So often it's they cry when you leave.
Mm.
Okay. Because they don't know if they'll see you because even though you see them every single day, they have no concept of time.
Yeah.
Or you don't know what you walk into. We were talking about not being recognized. And one of the stories that broke my heart was a woman goes in and brings a cake to celebrate her birthday with mom. Mom had
Mm.
no idea who she was, not just her name, but her whole existence. And she said, it's the first birthday in my life. My mother didn't wish me a happy birthday.
Yeah.
You
It's
know, there
hard.
are, it is very hard.
Yeah.
And as I'm sure you know that from your wife, that there are just multiple phone calls constantly.
Mm.
I know you just called me 5 minutes ago. So
Yeah.
I also wanted to write it for employers to build a little bit of that empathy.
Mm.
Like, look at, they have enough grief going on. Don't get on the case on something stupid.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
mom called the sixth time. Yep, she did. It's not that
Yeah.
the caregiver wants to hear it, but if you don't, it causes behaviors that are worse.
Yeah. Is there anything a person who might be fearful of getting Alzheimer's, is there anything they can do from your research to prevent it? Anything with diet, anything with exercise, or a combination thereof?
There are, and not being a medical person, I don't
Sure.
want to give those.
Okay.
So follow Alzheimer's, go through alzheimers.org or your physician. But the more processed foods we eat, the more
Yeah.
it affects our brain.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the good health habits that we have will affect the brain. So we want to keep doing that, but we also need to stop being mindless in our entertainment, to sit
Mm.
down and just have somebody entertain us.
Right.
So within Phone Home, one of our stages is that we will call and make phone calls just to ask questions, but not like, hey, who's the president? But like, would you rather go on vacation to a cabin or to the beach?
Right.
Okay, would you rather have a blue flower or a yellow flower?
Mm.
Okay, so they're still thinking questions, but they're not being quizzed. So it's
Right.
conversational. And so just you have to keep active because your brain is a use it or lose it, particularly with cognition.
Yeah, absolutely. So doing activities like games, puzzles,
Right,
reading, anything, learning a new language, learning a musical instrument, anything that's stimulating your brain is going to help in this battle against the disease. It might delay
correct,
it, it might prevent it. And like you said, eating a healthy diet, avoiding processed foods, just like we're protecting our hearts, which
right.
has delicate blood vessels, our brains have delicate blood vessels as well. So we have to be careful there too. Um, it's amazing that so many people are dealing with this disease today, because I think we're getting older, the drugs are getting better. People who used to live to their 70s are now living to their 80s. People living in their 80s are now living to their 90s. So this is something that is going to affect us on some level eventually. And that's, I think, is the importance of your book, that we all
Correct,
need to be aware of what's going on with this disease, because either directly or indirectly it's going to impact you.
correct. So right now there is a worldwide effort to find a cure because it is projected that by 2050, that Alzheimer's will bankrupt the healthcare system.
Mm.
And so, because it takes so many people, and so many of the caregivers are unpaid, but as that continues to increase in their numbers, that won't be able to happen. And so it will bankrupt the healthcare system if they don't do so. And so by when the numbers continue to increase, we have to be able to know what is going on around us. Okay, because there will be more people that you see in the grocery store having a behavior. They might just be having fun and be a spunky old lady. That's what I hope to be. Okay, but they also might be having something going on. So just go with the empathy instead of the, ooh, they're kind of crazy. Or,
Exactly. Well, the best people in life are a little crazy. So anyway, let me ask you about the anecdotes in your book. I think they're very effective in driving home your points. How did you collect them, and why did you choose to include them?
Well, that was my dissertation study. I did a qualitative study of the emotional experiences that the caregivers have. And so I would record their conversations and then had to transcribe them, and then use like Max QDA or other statistical analysis to work through the qualitative study, which is different than how you do quantitative. And so the way the book is lined up is to go from early Alzheimer's through the progression. Okay, so through the dissertation, it was by the caregiver. Okay, so when you read the book, it builds an intensity and not in the right way.
Yeah, wonderful. This almost seems like it'd be a terrific documentary if you were to interview these people on camera and then perhaps even show the patients that they're dealing with. It would be, I think, a very illustrative type of documentary to expose the realities, shine light on the realities of dealing with this disease.
I agree.
Yeah.
So do you have any connections?
Well, Hollywood, if you're listening, Lauren P. Brown has collected a ton of data, a ton of stories, has interviewed multiple people, has become an expert in Alzheimer's disease through her research, and has written a wonderful book. It's called Who Was I? The Gut-Wrenching Truth About Alzheimer's. And as I mentioned before, this is an important book because whether it's your mother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, whether it's you yourself or an extended family member, at one point in your life, you're going to deal with someone who has Alzheimer's. And this book will give you great understanding, great tools to deal with it, and hopefully improve your empathy as well. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight. And remember, the book, Who Was I? The Gut-Wrenching Truth About Alzheimer's, is available wherever books are sold, including Amazon. The links are below this interview.